So let's talk a little bit about what the application project for the course is going to be and how we're going to structure it. And part of what we are also going to try to learn during the course is how to manage a project. One of the things that doesn't happen in my courses, you guys are in second semester, I don't know if you've had this experience in other courses, but usually you talk about the final project at the beginning of the course. And then you start working on it, and then you don't remember about it until it's the end of the course. And then you have to turn it in and you're full of work and et cetera, et cetera. We're not going to work that way in this course. In this course, the development of the final project, we're going to start it off beginning next month, and we're going to be reviewing these. The idea is that all of you should get to the end of the semester with your final, with your application project finished and working, okay? And so, what is the application project? The application project is going to be the development of a database system for a real life situation or problem. The solution should go through the stages that we've been talking about: the analysis, design, implementation, deployment, and testing and deployment. And should include everything that we would need to have that set up, including users manuals, interfaces, etc. We're going to do this in houses, so you're going to be working in groups, okay? And the important thing here is that it should be based on a real problem or real situation, okay? And that you guys are going to define that, okay? So there are going to be 5 stages to the project. By the way, this document, you may find this document in Blackboard. It's called, I believe it's called Application Project Stages and Due Dates or Deliverables or something like that. You can find that document there, so you can review it. And so we're going to be going through actually 6 stages. There's a stage 0 there. And the due dates for these are defined beginning in a couple of weeks. And there's roughly going to be about 1 deliverable per month, okay? And the final deliverable is the complete database system working, okay? And so the first stage, which is stage 0, is the problem definition. I need you guys to define the problem or the situation, from in what organization you're going to be doing it, and define the problem. And when I say define the problem, I'm going to be giving you some examples. So for example, the COVID-19 registration example, that's a definition of a problem. It can be an unstructured problem. Obviously, you don't have the solution to it. So it could just be this organization requires a database system for this, okay? And this is the profile of the organization. That's stage 0. That's the problem definition. And you have to turn this in by March 7th, okay? We have the exam on March 7th, but this is just a deliverable for that day. We're going to review it on Wednesday. So the exam is on Monday. We're going to review this on Wednesday, okay? Now, what do you have to turn in? This is actually very simple, this deliverable. It's actually, it can be 2 pages. 1 page that has a brief description of the organization, and the next page, a brief description of the problem definition, okay? And the problem definition, again, we're going to see an example today as to how you can structure the problem definition, okay? That's due on March 7th. There's going to be a deliverable there for that stage. And on March 9th, I'm going to ask you to present these, and we're going to make comments. The idea is during that week, or before the week of March 14th, or by the week of March 14th, that you have your problem definition ready and approved by me. And why does it require approval by me? Because I need you guys to define a problem or a situation that can be solved during the semester, okay? What does this mean? There's something that's called scope, and we had mentioned this before, scope. It's the boundaries that we define for our project. So remember the COVID-19 registration that we're saying we're going to focus on this. And I think Miguel mentioned the fact that, well, this needs international approval and the UN and et cetera. Well, that's out of our scope. But if we were to include it in our scope, then our problem gets bigger. So I need for you guys to turn this problem definition, your proposals for problem definitions on March 7th. I'm going to review them. We're going to present them on Wednesday, March 9th, and I'm going to give you feedback. And I'm going to say, yeah, you know what? Your problem definition is okay for what we're going to be doing in the course. Or I'm going to say, you know what? I would suggest you reduce the scope to just focus on this. Or, you know what, the problem definition that you're defining is really too simple. I need you to add this, this, and that, okay? I don't want you to take on something so large that you're not gonna be able to finish it. And I don't want you to take on something so simple that it's equivalent to a lab exercise. So does that make sense? Is that clear? So that's for March 7th, okay? I'm going to be mentioning through the rest of the stages. Questions regarding stage 0, over here in the classroom or over at home? Anybody have any questions with stage 0? It's 2 pages that you have to turn in just for stage 0.
It's the pages explaining everything, like where we're supposed to solve, or like what exactly the 2 pages.
Okay, so the first page is the organization you're going to be. So, for example, I'm just going to give an off example. The organization is CETIS University. And CETIS University is a university that has 3 campuses. You're going to give a brief description of the organization because I need to understand what organization it is. I mentioned CETIS University, but it could actually be the organization is Colectivo, whatever this organization that sells things, for example. Or the organization can be Tacos Vincis, for example. And you're going to give me a brief description so I can understand what the organization is. That's the first page. Okay. And we're going to see an example today as to what that is. I'm going to give you an example of a fictitious organization, and that's kind of how you have to structure. That's page 1. And then on page 2, you're going to tell me, okay, the organization needs. CETIS University needs a database system to manage, what is that, by the way? That poster?
It's a notebook.
Oh, it's a notebook. I thought it was a poster. I don't have my glasses on, and I thought it was a poster of CETIS something because of the colors. Sorry. CETIS University needs a database system to manage the student projects for the School of Engineering. So it needs to keep track of what projects there are, what students are involved, and what resources there are. That's the problem definition. Or Tacos Vincis. You already described what they are. The problem definition is going to be Tacos Vincis needs a database system to manage the inventory, their inventory. Or Tacos Vincis needs a database system to manage their sales. Now that's an example of scope. You can have an organization like Tacos Vincis, and I'm just going to focus on the inventory. Or I'm going to focus on the sales. Or I'm going to focus on the human resources management, the employees and how they're going to be paid. Either of those 3 can be the final project. But if you tell me I want to do a database system that knows all of that, I'm going to say, you know what, you're trying to read, just focus on one of those. Okay, that's going to be page number 2. Okay, does that make sense?
Yes, I just want to know like what we are supposed to describe.
Yeah, and actually in the PowerPoint, in the example we're going to see today, there's a fictitious organization that's called Sosa Corp. And there's actually 2 slides that would kind of be page 1 and page 2 as kind of an example. Okay.
Thank you.
And these are important because I need to understand the organization and I need to understand the problem you're going to be focusing on. Now, this can be anything, by the way, in any type of organization. In the previous years, students have had some family organizations, like I mentioned, the Colectivo, or they have some sort of family member or friend that has some sort of organization that they want to develop something for them. And so that can be any of them. Okay, those are examples. So those would be the 2 pages for March 7th. Okay, in housing. It has to be a real organization, so it can't be something that's made up, okay? Questions, any more questions with stage one? Over here or at home? How are we doing at home? Any questions at home? No? Okay, that's stage one. Now, again, when you turn in stage one, I might make suggestions and you might need to modify it, okay? But that's the purpose. I don't want you to start the final project and then do something that's not doable. And the other thing, the final project could be a fictitious organization. So I could give you a fictitious organization and for you to develop the database out of that. But I want you guys to focus on a real organization because of the next stages. So remember that stage one is the analysis. So for stage zero, you're gonna have to do a little bit of analysis for the problem definition, a little bit of analysis. But in stage one, I want you to go deeper in the analysis. So remember that for the COVID registration, there were a series of questions that we defined. Well, you're gonna do the same thing here. You're gonna define or identify a series of questions. What do I need to know? And then you're gonna do interviews with people in the organization to get that from primary sources. And stage one then is going to be your list of analysis questions and the summary of the interviews you did. Okay. So for example, if the organization is CETIS University and we want to do a database system for the student projects that are in the School of Engineering, we would have to define some questions. Who would we interview for that example? Who would we be interviewing for the CETIS exam? Over here or at home? Again, if the project were to be a system for the School of Engineering that organizes all the student projects and the information of the students participating in those projects, who would we interview to understand how that's structured?
Teacher?
Maybe some of the professors, so Fernandez and teachers, some of the professors that are involved in these projects, okay? Yeah. Who else?
And the students that have participated in the project?
Maybe some of the students that are project leaders on those projects would be important as well. Maybe the dean of the school, maybe the coordinators. So we have to identify who we're going to interview and do those interviews. And that's going to be stage one. That's for March 21st, okay? The rest of the stages have to do with what we're going to be what we already talked about, which is the development. The stage three is the design, which is the conceptual design or model, the entity relationship diagram. You're going to know how to do these in the next few weeks. So that deliverable is from April 25th. By the way, some of these deliverables, starting with stage one and stage two, you can already start working on them. You don't have to wait assuming that your organization and your problem definition is correct, you don't necessarily have to wait to do these. Then by the time we get to stage three, or before we get to stage three, we're already going to be doing lab exercises with Microsoft Access. So you're already going to know how to implement the database in Microsoft Access, how to do queries, how to do forums, how to do all the interactions. So by May 23rd, you should already have your database for your problem implemented in Microsoft Access. And then actually stage four and stage five, stage four is the testing. It's just for you to demonstrate to me that you have tested your system with some cases. And stage five is the final deployment or implementation, which is doing your final presentation, doing a user's manual and doing the developer's manual. And that'll round it up by June 1st, okay? I'm obviously gonna give, I'm gonna give extra points and I am gonna consider for the final exam exemptions, how well you do your final project and your presentations, okay? So questions with this? In each of the stages, we're going to be reviewing them. So you're going to turn them in, your deliverables, but we're going to review them here in class. It's kind of like in real life, and if you're working in an organization and you're working on a project, there are periodic project reviews that you do for the bosses, the stakeholders. We're going to be doing the same thing here. Okay, that's to give you feedback in real time of what you're doing, okay? Okay, questions with the application project, anybody? Over here in the classroom or over at home? Any questions at home with the application project? Nope, we're good? Okay. So please start working on the first deliverable, which is the problem definition. And I suggested if you have questions or doubts regarding the type of organization, the problem definition, please ask me before you turn in the deliverable, okay? Remember that I kind of have a rule. I don't know if you remember from the math course, but it's kind of a rule with me when everything in any of my courses. I don't like, and you're gonna feel that I don't like it, I don't like receiving deep questions about deliverables the night before you have to turn them in, okay? Now, what do I mean deep questions? A deep question is, I get a WhatsApp message from somebody saying, what were the 2 pages that we had to turn in for stage 0? And that's being asked on March 6th at around 11 p.m. Okay. If you send me that message, you're going to get a very interesting response from me. Those are deep questions. If you send me a WhatsApp saying, oh, do we have to turn it in as a PDF, or it has to be a PowerPoint presentation? That's a valid question. That isn't a deep question. Okay. But if you ask me deep questions the day before, that really tells me that you're doing it the day before. So please don't do that. Ask questions before. Okay. There's enough. I'm giving you enough time to do this. Okay. Okay. So if there aren't any questions, let's continue with what we were working on before. Okay. And what we were talking about, let me show my screen. Okay, so what we were talking about last class, we were talking about entities and relationships, which were the first part of the development of the database. So, and remember, these are exam questions, these are direct exam questions. So what is an entity? An entity is going to be an object or a thing that can either have a physical or conceptual existence. It can be something physical or something conceptual. That is distinguishable from other things or objects, and it is important within the context of our problem. And entities in the database are very important for a relational database, and they're going to be described by a series of attributes, okay, that are going to define them. So we had given the example of a university, and so for a university, students, courses, professors, the classrooms, those were examples of entities. Okay, so let's do this. You have a taqueria, okay? Because it's that day in the morning. Ivan, name this taqueria. What's this taqueria gonna be called? What would you like it to be called?
Asadero y van a hacer.
Asadero y van a hacer. I like it. And are you on Uber Eats? Good. Good. Okay, I like it. Tacos Asadero. Ivan Aceves. If I write it Z, right?
That's.
That's, sorry about that.
fine, you can leave it.
No, sorry about that. There are people within my own family. So I write Sosa like this, but there are people within my own family that write Sosa like this. It's really, really confusing. So we are relatives, and within our same family, I've got uncles and cousins that write it down with a Z. So we've got, so Ivan has an asadero, right? And he wants a database system for his for his taqueria. And let's kind of look at the three situations that we were looking at. Let's say that there's three versions of this database system. So version 1 has to do, let's say that version 1 is an inventory system. Okay. It is an inventory system. When we're saying inventory, it's everything you need for the taqueria to operate. Okay, materials, etc. This would be version 1 of the problem definition. Version 2, let's say that you want to have a database system that keeps track of the sales. And version 3, let's say that you want a database system that has to do with, I'm going to put it like this, HR or human resources. Okay. Is that clear? It's 3 different versions. Now, it can be 3 different systems that in the end are integrated into a whole enterprise system, but we're looking at 3 situations of the same thing. So going back to the stage 0, the organizational bio would be tacos, asadero, y Iván Aceves. Okay. And I'm just going to ask you some questions, and you can answer Ivan randomly. You're defining your organization. Okay? So, do you have more than one taqueria?
It's an enterprise, sure, many taquerías.
You have many taquerias. So that's what we would put in the problem definition. So tacos, asadero, Iván Aceves is an enterprise that has many taquerias. Are you just local here to Mexicali, or is it regional in the state, or?
No, because I started in 2022 and then we expanded. And we made many more taquerías, but the original is in Mexicali.
The original, it's like if you've been to Ensenada, La Guerrerense, there's a little stand, the Guerrerense, which is really, really famous, but then there's a restaurant, there's other stuff. So you started off in Mexicali, but you branched out. Is the branching out regional, national? Regional. Let's say it's regional in the state of Baja California. You have many. So why is this important? Because of the scope. It's not the same to say it's just one taqueria in Mexicali to say, no, wait a minute. We're talking about many taquerias around the state, or even in one city. So it's regional. We would add that. So that's kind of information that we would put on the bio. Okay. Other information that might be interesting in the bio of the organization. Do you just sell to customers that go to your taqueria, or for example, if I want to do an event, can I hire you to do events?
Yes, I would have a carretita de tacos that I would put in the events.
Okay, so you can, so there's maybe 2 types of customers. The customer that's the person that's going to the taqueria, but there may be the customer or the organization that hires you outside. So that's a possibility. That is the information that you're going to put on the organizational bio that I'm asking for stage 0. And then for the problem definition, you would say, okay, we want to talk about Asadero Iván Aceves wants a system to manage the inventory, and with these characteristics. or sales or HR. Now let's think about entities. We're just we're just thinking about entities now. For each of these situations. And let's just see things that come to mind, okay? Let's remember that an entity is going to be something that's of interest within the context of the problem that we need to identify. It's going to be unique. So let's look at these three things. Okay, so inventory, we're talking about inventory. What would be entities that are important with regards to Tacos Asadero Iván Aceves that have to do with the inventory? Okay, well, I'm going to start it off just to help you guys out. I'm going to identify one entity that's actually important for more than one of these categories. I'm going to say that I'm going to say that the menu, because Ivan, I'm going to ask you another question. You offer different types of tacos, right? It's not just, you have quesadillas, I imagine. I'm going to ask you a tricky question that's kind of a deal breaker for me and my wife with taquerias. We really like put a mark in the taqueria. Do you offer tripas? Tripitas, asadas? Try, that sounds so. Have you ever tried to explain to an American what tripitas is and why they should taste them? It's not a very fun experience. But do you offer tripitas? You're thinking about it, maybe not.
Sure. It's like I haven't seen many taquerias that offer tripitas, and having tripitas might be expensive too.
Oh, you have to consider it into your cost model. So maybe you don't, but we like tripitas. So the menu, you can have different items on the menu. Is that clear to everybody? So you're gonna have tacos, you're gonna have quesadillas, and each of these is gonna require different ingredients, right? So the menu could be an entity because the menu is gonna contain the different items that we have, okay? Is that clear to everybody? That could be an entity, an example of an entity. What could be another example of an entity then that could be on the inventory side?
Sure. The things you put in the taco, like salsa, ingredients.
Okay, ingredients. Well, let's. I'm gonna put forth that there's gonna be two types of ingredients. Okay, I'm gonna call one of them. I'm gonna say the ingredients in themselves of the taco. So you need the tortilla. Is the tortilla gonna be harina or maíz? Is it gonna be carnes? It's gonna be asada. Those are gonna be the ingredients of the taco themselves. Okay, and then there's gonna be the add-ons, which is what you put on the taco. That, do you agree that if I give you if you order a taco de carne asada, I'm going to make that taco and I'm going to give that to you, and that inventory has gone out. But the salsas, the guacamole, etc., those are things you put out there, and they might be consumed at different rates depending on what people do. So that they're different. So let's call the other one add-ons. Okay. Okay. Are we clear as to how we're identifying entities? Okay. What other stuff should we consider as inventory? And I want to hear some people at home that we're good up to this point. Over at home, what are we missing? Let's see, Daniel.
Providers.
I think you mean suppliers.
Yes. That.
Correct. It's actually important for us to identify suppliers because remember that, and you guys are industrial engineering, the supply chain is something very important for you guys. So why are suppliers important? You want to have good relationships with suppliers. You want to see about local and regional suppliers. Right now with the pandemic, some suppliers are just keeling over and disappearing. So you might have had a very good supplier of guacamole, of aguacates. I forgot how to say avocados. Of avocados. And suddenly that supplier disappeared and you need to find a new one. So yes, good observation. The suppliers are going to be another entity. My English is terrible today. I'm sorry about that. Suppliers, help me out. Suppliers, is that with two P's or one? It's two, right? Wow. The mental. Suppliers, good. And Corey, please, what were you thinking?
The napkins, the floors, spoons.
Correct. What could we call those?
Utensils?
Utensils? There's actually because there's the forks, the napkins, et cetera. There's actually another name. Utensils could be fine. Cubiertos, yeah, which is utensils. They're actually called. They can be utensils. They can actually also be called consumables. Okay. Although that's kind of iffy because the add-ons are consumables as well. So let's call these. I'm going to use Miguel's terminology. Let's call these utensils. Or I'm going to just also say consumables. Are we good up to this point in identifying entities? I'm gonna ask a question here, and I'm gonna put it in red. Are the employees an entity here?
What if they can be more than one part?
Could you say that? I think it was Andres. Could you say that again?
What if we can place them in more than one of the parts? Or we can't?
In the locations, you mean?
Like
Oh.
we have the inventory, the sales, and the HR. Like what if we can place them in like all three of them?
Well, that's the idea. That would have to be defined in the scope of the problem. Are we doing this system for just one location, or are we doing it for the whole for the whole enterprise? So before I ask this question again, maybe an entity that's important here is maybe an entity that's important here is the I'm going to call it the site. So is this the taqueria? Are we doing or are we looking at inventory for the Mexicali taqueria one that's located in Boulevard Lázaro Cárdenas, or are we doing it for? So the site might be important as well. That's a good observation. But I'm going to go back to the question. I'm going to write it in a different color. Would an employee be an entity that would be important or of context with regard when I'm looking at the inventory?
No.
I don't think so as well. Now, it's clear that Asadero Ivan Aceves, you couldn't become an enterprise if you didn't have employees. Obviously, you have employees, but right now, I'm looking at the inventory. So yes, an employee is a part of the organization, but it really doesn't make sense within this context. Okay. Okay. Let's leave that there.
Teacher,
Yes. Juan, go ahead.
yes. Can you explain why site is in inventory? I didn't get it.
Okay, site could be or couldn't be an inventory depending on how we're focusing on the problem. If we're assuming that we're looking at the whole enterprise, not just one of the taquerias because they're regional, then I want something that identifies the sites. So there's a site in. So when I say site, I mean the specific taqueria where it's located. Okay, so if I'm looking at the regional, I want the system for it to be for the whole inventory, then I want to be able to identify what specific taqueria I'm talking about. Does that make sense? If we were to say, you know what, yeah, but Ivan has decided that he wants to test this system just with one taqueria in Tijuana. Okay, then we would reduce the scope. So are we good with identifying entities right now? We're just identifying entities here, okay? Now, each of these entities, that's the next step we're going to be doing further on, is going to have attributes. The attributes are gonna be things that are gonna describe them, and we need to identify these as well, but we're gonna do that. We're gonna do that later on, okay? Now we're gonna jump over to talk about sales. Now we're looking at sales. We wanna know what products were sold. Ivan, why would it be important for you to have a data or information with regards to sales?
Well, to see how much money I'm making and how much money I'm spending and how much money I have to spend on buying more ingredients and add-ons and.
Correct. So the basic premise of having a system that gives me information on sales is that I want to know how much I'm selling. I want to know the costs, et cetera, et cetera. But actually, this could be important because you could use it in a deeper way to look at tendencies. Well, it seems that I opened up in one of the taquerias the possibility of having tripitas, and that's a success. So that's kind of a tendency. I'm hearing that people are liking this, and this particular product is being sold more, so maybe I should focus on that. So it can also help you in that respect. So that's why a sales system is gonna be important as well. Okay, so now we're gonna be focusing on sales. Just sales. So what could be entities that now are important for the sales part? And let's identify a few. Now, this is just an exercise. We don't have to be exhaustive here and do it. But what is important? And some of the things from inventory might go on the other side as well. I'm going to put forth that the menu is also important as an entity with regards to sales, because it's going to have the products we're selling. There might be a difference between the inventory entity as a menu and the sales entity as a menu. What do you guys think might be a difference between one and the other? And think about the attributes. They're going to be attributes. Go ahead.
That in sales, you want to know how many products you sold in a day, and in the inventory, you want to know what ingredients you want to prepare the product. The
Correct.
taco, quesadilla, something.
Correct. And I believe that was Joel, right?
Yes.
Good. Daniel? Thank you, Juan.
The menu to know the prices.
The price. So in the sales menu entity, we want to know the product and the price. In the inventory, we might add the price, but it might really not be that important. But in the sales, it is important. What could be another entity with regards to sales that we might want to add there? The site, correct. We would like to keep track of the sales with regards to the sites. That would make sense. Let's add one more. What else would be important as an entity with regards to sales over here at home? Let's see. We've got Arturo. Go ahead.
Yes. I don't know if this one could be one, but for sales, could it be like the marketing?
Did you say that again, please?
The marketing, like how well has the business expand so people can know about it?
Well, the marketing or the branding is an action. Okay. Right now, what we want in the database is information regarding how much we've sold, okay, what we've sold, and to whom we've sold it to. Okay. So the marketing might be another facet of it, but it's not necessarily an entity. Okay. Joel.
It can be like if they are, I don't know, if they go to a restaurant or they order for home delivery, I don't know, they kind of sell.
Oh, the type of sale. Oh, What's interesting as well, I haven't really thought about. Let's call it, how do we call it that? I'm gonna call it just for now, type of sale. If it's physical or are we doing it delivery, that's interesting. Or let's say this instead of type of sale. The sale itself, whether it is local or if it's delivery, in itself is an entity because it has attributes that are of interest. What did I order? How much did I order? What was the total cost? If I'm adding taxes, etc. If it was local or if it was a delivery, etc., we would include that. There's one thing that's missing. I said that the sales system would have to do with what we were selling, how much we were selling, and to whom we were selling it to. So what's missing there? It's very important. Clients? The clients or the customers. Okay, I'm going to call it customers. And the customers is going to be an entity because we mentioned that Asadero y Banaceres can sell to the people that go to the taquerias, or they could actually sell for events. Okay. Now you're saying, wait a minute, but if I go to the taqueria and I order 3 tacos and a Coke and I eat them there, then why would they need to keep my information? That might not make sense. So I don't know. Luis Espinosa, you've gone to a taqueria and ordered, what's the most amount of tacos you've ordered? Just out of curiosity. Or eaten. I know people who do ridiculous amounts of 9. Okay. So you order your 9 tacos, you order a beverage and you pay. Would there be some sort of situation where the taqueria would need to register your information?
Maybe, I don't know.
Could you say that again?
Maybe, I don't know, because why do you want to know what I eat 9 tacos? So because it's not normal that.
Oh, no, wait. Well, one thing is they do want to know that you ate 9 tacos because something that might be interesting is kind of have an average of the tacos people are eating. But what I'm asking is, as a customer, you're an entity. You have a name, you have an address, you have a phone number, etc. Why would there be a situation where the taqueria would need to say that? Let's see, Miguel.
If you want to make a factura,
Facturación, very important. And that's something very of here of Mexico, by the way. Again, try to explain facturación to an American and you're going to have an interesting time. Because in the United States, you just get a receipt. And with the receipt, you can actually, that's for tax purposes, that's enough. Over here in Mexico, we have the whole facturación system. So, correct, Miguel, we might need the customer's information for facturación because let's say that Luis ate 9 tacos and a Coke. And let's say that Jesus has this big birthday party, and he hires Asadero y Banaceres to do that, and that's going to be a higher bill. In both of those situations, none of them might need a factura. However, if Luis, you have a company, Luis, you are working for a company that is in, you're working here and they sent you to a trip into Guadalajara and they gave you money to spend as expenses. And since Asadero y Banaceres is expanding, there's a Taqueria Banaceres in Guadalajara. And since you know Ivan and you know that his tacos are really good and you want to help the business, you go to that taqueria. But if it's 9 tacos, how much would 9 tacos be? Roughly,
Like 225, yeah.
300,
and so
Maybe.
200, 225.
23, maybe if you had a drink or whatever. But you don't want to pay that out of your pocket. You want the company to pay that because you're on an expense trip. That's why usually when we travel and we have money from our companies, we usually don't go to taquerias. Because those 300 pesos, if I can't get a factura, the company isn't gonna give me back my money. So in that situation, Luis, you might need a factura. That's why they're gonna ask you for the information. Now, ideally, let's say that you, Luis, go to Guadalajara frequently. That means you're a frequent customer of Tacos Asadero Iván Aceves. So you don't want every time you go to the Guadalajara taqueria to give your information. You just want to say, oh, Luis Espinosa, oh, here it is. You need a factura. Is your email okay? And they send it to you, right? The other thing I'm going to write down, well, I'm going to leave it at that. The big event that the birthday party Jesus is organizing, maybe he also wants that factura to register. So the customer's information might be important for that, for those reasons, okay? And that's important if you guys, in your problem definition for your application project, if you're thinking about organizations and you're gonna be focusing on the sales part, the facturación thing is important. Yeah, try to explain facturación and tripitas to somebody who's not from around here. And it's gonna be complicated. I once went to eat with Dr. Dan Chunk, remember the guy that gave you the talk? And a couple of his friends, we went to, oh, what's the name of the restaurant? Palominos. Yeah. And we were talking about this, I love meat. I love parrilladas. It's like the best thing you can give me to eat with everything. And we were ordering, and I'm like, well, we can order a parrilla. I'm like, what's that? Well, it's gonna have meat, it's gonna have tortillas, things that they know and identify because they've been to Mexico. And I'm like, I'm gonna order some tripitas. And they're like, what is that? Well, it's kind of like the intestine, the small intestine, but it's really not the one where the nasty stuff comes out of. It's a type of intestine that the cow has. And at the moment I said intestine, they were like, yeah. I know, but they're good. They're fried. They're like kind of like a chicharrón. They're really good. And they were like, nah, I don't want to try that. And one of them said, yeah, order it and I'll try it. And once I was trying to explain to an ABET accreditor when we went to lunch, why when we ordered, we needed to separate the alcoholic beverages for purposes of expense reporting, because those couldn't be in the factura that we put in, et cetera. And it was like, but you just grab the receipt. And I'm like, no, in Mexico, we have this whole process of registering sales. And so those are examples of some entities that could be on the sales side. There might be others, but we're just doing this exercise right now to kind of understand what entities are. Now let's go over to the HR side. Oh, and going back to Luis Gallardo's question about the 2 pages. So for example, in the second page, kind of what I said here, the Asadero Iván Aceves requires a system to manage sales that is going to register information that has to do with how many products were sold, what types of products were sold, who they were sold to, etc. That would be the problem definition. Okay. Not necessarily saying you have to fill in the whole page, but that would be the second page. Now let's jump over to the HR side. In the HR part of the system, we want to have all of the information of our employees. Okay. Ivan said that this is an enterprise. This is not just a corner taqueria. This is an enterprise. So we want the information of the employees. We want, also, curiously enough, we want information that has to do with if the employees have dependents or not. What's a dependent? I'm a father and I actually, let's say that I have two dependents, which are my son and my daughter, okay? I'm not gonna say my wife is, this is being recorded, I'm not gonna say that my wife is dependent, because she's actually the breadwinner of the house, so thank you, Honeywell. So I would be her dependent, okay? So she makes the big money, not me. And I'm extremely proud of that. So I'll just say my son and my daughter are my dependents, okay? I want information about our dependents as well. And so what would be entities that are important with regards to the HR side? Somebody give me one.
For the employees.
The employees, correct? That's a very direct entity. The employees and the employee information.
Teacher, can you remember me what does HR stands for?
Oh, HR, I'm sorry, I'm being, HR is just an acronym for human resources. Okay. Or, so when I'm saying HR, it's all the part of your organization that handles employees.
Yeah.
And payments. So the employees would be an entity. That's a good example of an entity. The dependents would be another one. I think it's dependents, not dependents. I think. What else should we include here in the HR that's maybe on the other two?
The site, doesn't
The sites as well, because the employees are going to be in different sites. And I'm going to add another thing that I'm going to add that's that I think is important as well. There's going to be different types of employees. So, for example, Ivan is the CEO of the company. He's the highest employee, and Ivan is going to have managers. Okay, let's say that all of you are managers in different sites. And then you're going to have employees that are going to be the cooks, the servers, etc. So there's going to be a hierarchy, and there's going to be a type of employees. Okay, so let's say that we have I'm going to say employee
Position.
positions. Let's call them positions. That would be better. Position. So the position would be if it's a manager, if it's a cook, if it's etc. Those are examples of entities. And each of these are going to have attributes. And the other thing is that we need to relate these. That's going to be the next step we're going to do. We need to be able to relate these. Okay. Questions up to this point? Is this relatively? You're going to have to do this for your application project. This is actually stage 2, part of stage 2 of the application project, identifying the entities and doing some other stuff that we're going to be doing. So questions here with this one, over here or at home? I've got you a bit hidden, so I don't know if they're hands raised. So questions over at home. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to switch over back over to the PowerPoint. So those are examples of, what kind of examples of as to how to identify entities for a specific problem definition. Okay. Okay. Now, the next thing we need to do is define relationships, and we had already done a quick exercise about that. The relationships are going to be, we're gonna grab entities and say this entity is related to this entity by this connection. And ideally, we want these connections to be something very clear, something very identifiable. This relationship is going to be this association between two or more entities at any given time. That's going to describe how they interact with each other. It's very important to be clear when we define relationships. We want to use just 2-3 words, maybe, be very compact to describe the purpose. And we're going to try to describe the relationships like a phrase. So entity A is related to entity B. So like we mentioned, students take courses, professors teach courses. And so we're going to try to say the phrase, and the phrase needs to make sense. There might be entities that are related in different manners. So there might be entities that or two or more entities that are related amongst each other in different ways. And we're going to define something eventually that's called the cardinality of entities. So so for example, let's see. A student can take many courses, okay? And a course can be taken by many students, okay? So that's what's called a many-to-many relationship, okay? Sorry, I thought you were raising your hand. A person can have a passport, okay? So a person can have a passport, but a specific passport is only associated to one person. That's what's called a one-to-one relationship. So that's what's called the cardinality and how it's related. We're also going to be talking about that. Okay, so let's look at an example, okay? With more or less words, a bit more descriptive than this. This might be an example of what you could put with more explanation in page 1 of deliverable for stage 0. So we're going to look at an example. We're going to be working on this example for a few topics. And so this is an organization called Sosa Corp. Okay. Sosa Corp is a global company, okay, with a local footprint. It offers goods and services. So Sosa Corp does something, we don't know what it does specifically, to its customers and generates value to all its stakeholders. This is a very, 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 very generic description of an organization. Again, you guys would put more detailed information. Now, the company wants to manage the information relating to its employees, departments, as well as the different projects that the company has. That's the focus or the scope of the information system we're going to be talking. And so we have the following requirements that we need for this system. So the company is organized in departments, okay? Each department is going to have a unique identifier. So each department is going to have something that identifies it uniquely. It has a name, and there is an employee that's in charge of the department, the manager. And we also have information regarding when the said employee started managing the department. departments manage projects. And also, each of the projects has a unique identifier and a name. And the organization has employees. Employees have social security number, name, address, salary, gender, and birth date. Each employee is assigned to a department, but may work on many projects, okay? Let's say that Leo is assigned to the quality department. Jesus is assigned to the engineering department. But Jesus is working, I'm sorry, Leo has a project that has to do with improvement of a particular cell. And since Jesus is an expert in lean manufacturing, he's asked Jesus to work on the project. So even if Jesus isn't a part of Leo's department, he can work on a project from that department. The number of hours per week that an employee works on a project is also registered. And each employee has a supervisor, has a direct supervisor. Now, we're also registering information regarding the employee's dependents. And this is for insurance purposes. So why would I want information, or why would set these one information about my son or my daughter, for example, for me as an employee, because I have an insurance policy and the dependents are included in the insurance policy. So the organization manages that as well. Each dependent is going to have a name, a gender, and a relationship with the employee, okay? Questions up to this point? Is the problem definition and description of the general elements of this organization understood?
Yes.
Okay, so what I want us to do right now is to, oh, no, not yet. We're still here. I want us to identify or do the same exercise we were doing now and try to identify the entities for this system, for this situation, SOSACOR. Let's try to identify the entities. Okay, let's start off. Can somebody tell me one entity that's clearly identifiable from what we read over here or at home?
Stakeholder.
Stakeholders. You mean the people that are investing in the company? That could be an entity, but does it have to do with the description that we just said that we were going to be focusing on? No, but it could be an entity depending on the scope. But for the scope that we're talking about, we're not, this system isn't going to report any information or stores any information of the stakeholders, but they could be an entity, but not necessarily for the scope that we have here.
The departments.
Correct, Leo. The departments are an entity.
Employees.
Employees is another one, correct. Okay. What other are entities that could be identified according to what was mentioned?
The projects?
The projects, correct. Projects are entities as well. We need to keep track of these.
The supplies.
The supplies, for example. Again, supplies could be an entity as well, but for the description that they're giving us, they're not really telling us that we want to keep track of the supplies. So I'm going to go with what Leo mentioned. So yes, it's same as stakeholders. Supplies and stakeholders could be entities, but not necessarily within this context. And I'm not gonna forget one thing that one of my professors told me when I was taking one of these classes way, way back when I was in your shoes. Imagine that you guys are selling me this system, okay? And I just told you the description that I want. This is what I want. You're like, okay, good, I understand. And then suddenly Ivan says, well, would you like me to include something that keeps track of the stakeholders? And I'm like, well, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, add it. And then you mentioned, well, would you like me to keep track of the supplies that are used in the project for inventory purposes? And I'm like, sure, add that. And I remember this professor saying, because in that context, they were talking about the final project of the course. So it's very funny because the professor had given the final project of the course, and suddenly students were saying, well, the typical students that you guys probably don't like, and I don't like as well, but typical students that raise their hands and like, teacher, could we add this? Because they want to be good with the teacher. And suddenly the teacher said, yeah, add that to the project. And then suddenly another student says, could we add this? And he's like, yeah, add that to the project. And suddenly he stopped the group and said, do you know what you guys are doing? You're adding stuff that wasn't originally asked for. And that makes it so as developers, we have to be very careful with that. So usually in the analysis part, we kind of just take note and then we say, okay, this is what the scope is. This is how much it's going to cost. And then after that, we go back to the customer and say, you know what if we add this or this or that, but after we've analyzed it? But stakeholders and sales could be entities, but not necessarily for the scope that we're talking about. Departments, employees, projects, that's correct. Any additional entities that might be missing here? The dependents, it was mentioned that we want to keep track of the dependents.
So in this case, you mentioned that the company offers goods and services. The services can be entities.
They could be.
Types of.
They could be. The products and services could be entities. It's similar to when we were talking about the taqueria. If we want a system that keeps track of what products and services are being offered and how much they're being, which are more popular, and et cetera, yes, we would definitely focus on that. They could be entities. Right now, if we're just looking at how basically this system, you guys as industrial engineers are going to be using a lot of systems like this. There's a lot of softwares right now that keep track of work. So imagine that all of you are working in my company and I'm paying you, because a lot of companies pay according to hours that are charged to a specific project. So my wife, for example, at Honeywell, it's always the thing at night that says, oh, I haven't done my e-charge. What does the e-charge mean at Honeywell? She has to log onto her computer and say, I was working on these 3 projects, so I have to indicate how many hours I worked on each project. Why do you think that is? Because the projects have budgets and the budgets pay those hours, okay? So these types of systems, there's a lot of systems out there that help organizations keep track of work. So they want to know, in the end, this system, for example, Leo, if you are an employee of this company, they want to say, wait a minute, Leo is an expert in this, this, and this, and he's actually only been assigned to these 2 projects. So I'm not really taking advantage of the expertise, the expertise that Leo has. On the other hand, we might say that, okay, Arturo, I'm noticing that Arturo is working on a lot of projects and we're overworking Arturo. We need to distribute more of that work. Okay, I'm noticing that one department is using a lot of employees from the other departments. So that's also not cool. We need to distribute that better. So that's what this system is for. But if we were focusing on the products and the services, and I wanted to keep track of sales, and I wanted to look at tendencies, and yeah, those would be entities for that situation. Okay. I think that we're done. We have departments, we have employees, we have projects and dependents. I think those 4, we go back to the problem definition. I think those 4 cover the description that we have. The company is organized in departments. Each departments manage projects. We've already identified projects. We've identified employees and the dependents. So for now, those four entities would be enough, or would be okay for what we're thinking. Now let's think about the relationships between these, okay? And I'm gonna write them down. I'm gonna be exhaustive right now, meaning I'm gonna go through all of them, but not necessarily all of the entities have relationships with all of the other entities, okay? So now let's talk about relationships. I'm gonna write down departments. And I'm gonna go to the other departments and employees. And these are going to be the relationships. Can somebody tell me a word or maybe a couple of words that I can put here that relate departments to employees? To help me understand how departments are related to employees? And think of it as a phrase.
Organized,
Could you say that again?
organized.
Could be organized, yeah.
Management,
Could you say that again, Marco?
management.
Well, I'm gonna take those two examples. And remember that we're kind of thinking about a phrase. So Fernando says, departments organize employees. As a phrase that makes sense. But departments management employees, as a phrase doesn't make sense.
Oh, I didn't listen to the first part. I just heard something that connects the department and the employees.
But we could say manage. Departments manage employees. That could be another one.
Distribute.
Distribute employees, okay? Need employees, okay? Any of these could work, okay? Yes. Any of these could work. Any other ideas at home? It doesn't have to be something very complicated. Now, I'm gonna say just right now for the purpose of the exercise, I'm gonna go with a relationship that's that's much more simple than the ones you mentioned, but I'm not saying that the ones you mentioned couldn't be put there. But I'm just gonna say that departments have employees. Okay? We don't have to go even that further. A department has employees. It has 2, it has 3, it has 4, it has 10, but a department has employees, or departments have employees. Okay. Now I'm going to say departments and projects. What ideas do you guys have here? Departments and projects. How could I connect them? It could be have as well. We could say departments have projects. Yeah, we're not going to use have for everything, but but on a basic level, has makes sense. Okay, I'm going to put a couple of examples here. We could say departments have projects. If we want to be a little bit maybe more technical related to the description, I think it said that departments managed projects, so that could be another way of describing it.
What about create projects?
Create projects could be as well. Okay. Develop projects could be another one as well. Yeah. So again, what we're trying to do is something that connects one with the other and that makes sense with the context of the project. Okay. Okay. Departments manage projects. Okay. I'm going to go over here now. Departments. Notice that I'm being systematic. I took the first one and then I'm going through each of the other ones. Okay? Just to be systematic. Now I'm gonna say departments and dependents. I'm gonna make the direct question here. Does that relationship make sense? Departments and dependents, are they related somehow? They're indirectly related because of the employees, but departments and dependents, can I put a relationship there that makes sense? Departments and dependents doesn't make sense. I don't need this relationship, okay? I'm being systematic and going through all of them, but not all of the pairs are gonna have, are gonna need relationships. So I don't need departments and dependents. Now I'm gonna go to the next one. I've already done departments with the rest. Now I'm gonna go with employees. Employees and projects. What could I put there? Remember, they could be one or two words. I don't need to do employees and departments because I already did it on top. I could just flip it, but it's the relationship there. Employees and projects, what could I put there?
Create.
Employees create projects. Now, it's the second,
Development.
develop. Why would I go more with develop than create? Remember that the relationship has to describe the association. So if I say create, because it was mentioned before with, I think, departments and projects, creating means I created it, it's there. I'm not doing anything else with it. Develop means that it was created and I'm doing something with it. It describes a little better. Let's go with develop. That would be fine. We could have also said employees work on projects, so that's fine as well. Let's go with develop. That's okay. Not miss if somebody's raising their hand. I have the screen a little bit minimized here. So if somebody over at home wants to ask a question, just jump in, okay? Because I might not see the hand being raised, okay? And let's go with employees. And dependents. It's dependents, not dependents. Let's forget that. What could we put there? When in doubt, we can use. What do we put there?
Can we repeat?
Actually, when in doubt, we can do it. The employees have dependents. It's as long as it helps us understand the relationship. It's fine. This isn't really brain surgery. We're not having to do something. We just need something that describes it there. Okay. Again, I'm being systematic and relating all of these. Now I'm going to go with projects. So for example, projects and dependents. Is that one necessary? Does that one make sense? Well, if my son, my 5-month son is working on a project in my company, then something is really wrong with my organization and why I'm working there. So projects and dependents doesn't make sense. I don't need that relationship. Okay. So this one isn't needed. Okay. So if I'm being systematic, trying to relate everything with everything, then those describe the relationships. Is that clear to everybody? Okay. Over at home?
Yes.
Can somebody tell me, either here at home, a relationship that's missing that I need to include? That has to do with the description of the problem. And it has to do with this thing that an entity can be related to itself.
Maybe departments and departments?
You mean like project and project, or
Well, departments and departments, the company said that we have departments, the departments don't necessarily relate to each other. But what other thing was in the description of the problem? So let's say that all of us are employees in the company. Okay, all of us are employees in the company. But
Teacher, I think I know one.
go ahead, go ahead.
What about employees, supervise employees?
Correct, that's it, perfect, and that's what where we were going. The company, perfect, Andres, thank you. The description mentioned that there are managers or supervisors, but the supervisors are employees. So let's say that all of us here are employees of the company, but Aime is a manager. So she is an employee, but she supervises us. So it's the categories that we were mentioning. So correct, and actually it's exactly as you said it. We can say it exactly as you mentioned it, Andres. So employees. It is really a Monday for me today. Writing is employees and employees. Employees supervise other employees. Well done, Andres. So that's an example of an entity being related to itself. Okay. There's another one that's missing. And we mentioned that an entity can be related to another entity or other entities in different manners. Okay. So similar to the supervising, do you guys remember that the problem description said, oh, we're done. We're done. I didn't know it was 10:50. We're gonna continue with this. Well, I'm just gonna write it down here so it's recorded, and I'm sorry I stole a minute from you guys. Employees and departments. Employees manage departments, okay? That's another relationship between employees and departments that's important to note, okay? Okay, you guys,